Hello, welcome to Poamalogues. My name is Dasha Kelly Hamilton, and I will be your host. I am your poet laureate for the city of Milwaukee and for the state of Wisconsin. Poamalogues is an opportunity for me to gather around some folks that I've wanted to talk to for a long time and some people I've had a chance to really get to know well. And this is a chance for us to get to know each other in a fresh way. Poamalogues is not a conversation about the merits of academic poetry. Poamalogues is a way to use poems as a way to fall into other rich conversations. And today we are talking about wonder. I don't know about you, but I needed to be in a conversation today about wonder. And I'm excited to have a fairly new friend who I'm already learning new tidbits about them. I'm going to make them a lasting friend. So we're going to invite all the way from Reedsburg, making their way digitally to Milwaukee, Mr. Philip Matthews to the screen. How are you?
I'm good, Dasha. How are you?
You know what? I'm well. I'm well. When I learned that we were going to land on this topic, and I'm always surprised, so I appreciate that kind of having those pop rockets, pop rocks buzz in my own head. So to know that I have you in a particular context, so to know we get to move from all the smart talk that we've done to talking wondrously about smart things. I'm excited. I'm excited. Well, so I'm kind of giving a little bit away that we've had a chance to talk before. Tell the good people who you are. What's your whole life story?
So I'm Philip Matthews. I'm a poet, and Dasha and I know each other. We're both of an organization, or a network rather, Rural Urban Flow, which brings together agricultural and cultural producers in Milwaukee and Salt County together for various programs. So right now I'm in Reedsburg. I'm director of programs at Worm Farm Institute. We're a small nonprofit doing public programming that really brings together artists and farmers in the landscapes of Salt County, Wisconsin. But originally I'm from Wilson, North Carolina, so I'm a Southerner at heart. And surviving my first Wisconsin winter well so far so good. Tomorrow is my 34th birthday, actually, so it's a good time to be reflecting on my life. So going all the way back, I was a really, really shy kid. I have a sister who's 5 years older than I am, and she, when I was a kid, basically like spoke for me. And that's a funny thing to me now because I did become a poet, and so a lot of my poems are about sort of relationship with identity and relationship with voice. I used to, sing in church, grew up Southern Baptist. My mom was a Southern Baptist minister, which is a strange and a cool thing that has continued to inform me in my own poetry practice, sort of that relationship between spirituality and gender. You may or may not know that the Southern Baptist Church don't recognize women is spiritual leaders, and so that my mom does that has always been really inspirational to me. I think that she's just a badass individual. So I grew up really musical, singing in church, also book piano lessons from a really early age, starting at 7 years old. My grandmother, who recently passed away in August, was generous enough to pay for all of my lessons from the time that I was 7 to 18. So that sort of gift of musicality has continued to give to me throughout my life. What else? I'm queer, came out at 17 years old. That has been really an important part of my poetry practice. That sense of sort of like stepping up and saying who I am. Because I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, when I came out as queer, there was that kind of like tension between me and the church, and I left for a little bit. Found yoga as a spiritual system that actually used the body and honored the body as a sort of vehicle at the metaphysical and the divine stuff. So I feel like yoga healed my relationship to body and spirituality, and sort of like led me back into my Christian roots, and also led me into other systems of thought, Buddhism and Wicca witchcraft in particular. I feel like I'm going over 2 minutes, so I'll just say. Went to school at Tulane in New Orleans, then came up the Mississippi River to St. Louis, where I went to WashU to study poetry, stayed in St. Louis for a little bit, working at a museum, and then through the past few years of artist residencies and gigs, ended up here at Worm Farm Institute in Reedsburg. So that's it.
One, that is a jam-packed 2 minutes, and so much in that journey. And then now I'm not at all surprised that we are talking about wonder. So first, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
I am huge on celebrating oneself for one's birthday. I personally celebrate my birthday for the entire month of October. And it's evolved into a whole practice, quite frankly, about being grateful to be alive and being grateful every day on purpose. So it's, I have a whole ritual. I won't take our time talking about Dasha Fest, but since we are now officially in Philip Fest, one of my favorite birthday questions is, between this birthday and the next one, since you are already in this reflection space of this journey, what is one thing that you are hopeful for, that you're going to be intentional about between this birthday and the next one?
It's an odd answer, but as a poet, you probably know finances often are a point of tension when you're doing this thing that you feel is more than a profession; it's a vocation, right? And you're spending resources in order, all kinds of resources, financial and also other material, time, space, the way that you sort of choose to live your life. And last year, I had a sort of like a breaking point where I was like, I'm just tired of being broke in all of the ways, and I really need to sort of like heal my relationship with money and material resource. So last year I started the process of paying down literally a lot of debt. So this year I'm recommitting to that, to finish paying off my debt, and also starting to invest. My grandmother dying threw me for a loop. And just seeing the ways in which, as you get older, financial situations can become really, really hard. And I would love to be in a position to be able to care for my parents as they're getting older. And also, my niece now just turned 1 year old. I would love to do something that I've actually done, set up a brokerage account for her that I contribute to monthly, and then like on her 18th birthday, be like, "Happy birthday, Eden." There's this.
Go get your house.
Thinking about that, I guess what I'm saying is like thinking about that sort of caretaking in family in both generational directions, parents and also for my niece.
I was going to make a comment and you've answered it, honestly, in that you started off saying, I'm going to repair my relationship with money. I went to it was a conference, and it was all of us are running our little nonprofits best that we can. They had this superstar fundraiser, and however I got the VIP ticket to be in this breakout session, I was there. And was really powerful. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is she started our session putting us in pairs and asking us to talk about our relationship with money, our earliest memories about money. And so here we're here ready to get all of the shorthand tricks on how to write a proposal, how to get that winning grant. And I'm listening to a woman, and she's describing an incident where she saved up her money to buy herself a prom dress. Right. Way back, but whatever it cost, she saved her work money and bought this prom dress, and just how she was made to feel within her family of what a waste that was. And that money could have been spent to something else. And why didn't you, to where she thought she was doing great because she used her money and didn't pull from the house. And so she's always had this relationship then with money that was guilt-ridden. My relationship with money is I know what it looks like to save and invest. My father, I watched him pay the bills every Sunday, and I know he's talked to my sister and I over and over and over again about investing in a 401k. And so not having been able to follow through on that, because similarly what you said, as an artist, as a writer, you're catching, when you get that lick, you're catching up you're getting yourself out of those shallow holes. But it does speak to a relationship with what you think money should and could do. So to hear that you are repairing that by, instead of having a relationship with money, you're thinking about this lineage relationship with what money will afford you to do. Interesting. So I guess we just need a different reason.
Yeah.
Reason for us.
Well, and for me, so much of my poetry practice has been about identity, spirituality, sort of growing up as a queer person within my family, and therefore not totally understanding like what is my role in my family. I'm not married, I don't have children, I am, I live this kind of like transient poet life that is very different from my parents, certainly my grandparents and great grandparents, who are all sort of like deeply rooted in North Carolina, and my life is different. And so sort of the money thing, I had been thinking about it as a separate thing for a long time. And in the past year, especially, I've understood that my tension with it is also related to sort of figuring out who I am as an adult and who I am as a son, uncle, grandson, brother. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I overstand 1,000%. I have a colleague of mine. She was doing a project on belonging, and and so it was in. So so I participated, and I said, what's interesting is I've largely because of the course of my life, there are very few rooms that I'm uncomfortable in, because I've just been in so many of them, and I'm really clear about who I am. And the one time, and not the one time, but when I am uncomfortable, 99% of the time, it is because of a perception that has everything to do with money, has everything to do with income. If I'm in a room of traditionally professional, traditionally successful folks, they may have, houseboats, and I am hoping to get a ride. And so the fact that that even though we know better, you know what you produce, how you walk through the world. I know the things that I've accomplished. I know my heart. That even though we know better and we're fighting for justice differently, even internally, we still gauge our success on what's in the bank, on, if I can take a vacation, at will. So there's still monetary ways that we rate ourselves, even though we know better. So I completely understand. I mean, and it's real. I mean, because no one wants our poems to pay utility companies don't want our poems, right? The grocery store does not want our clever wit. They want money. So that balance of existing in this framework and also, being real about who you are and why you're doing it too.
Absolutely.
So I agree on the struggle.
Well, and I think that, going back to that idea of like, of wonder being at the center of this conversation, like, it's really helped me to look at all of that with like softer eyes and to be a little more curious, what I mean? Wonder at like, what is this relationship with money that I have? Like, what is money even as a resource or a flow of energy? And instead of, as you say, like often sort of judging myself or berating myself for having chosen for very valid reasons to live the way that I do, to be curious about it. And to say, well, if there isn't a precedent in my family or even in my near surroundings, like, how can I be curious about that and sort of approach it from this open-minded space rather than a judgmental space,
Yeah, I do. I'm super grown, and I'm still reassuring my parents that I earn money. So being clear about what your walk is really the work and what's going to be your North Star. So I am curious. Tell me how did you enter this conversation about wonder?
So the thing that I thought immediately of was being on an island. So one of my very good friends, Carly Ann Fay, who I know from St. Louis, grew up in between New Mexico and Hawaii on the Big Island. And so when she got married a few years ago, we went to the Big Island for her wedding. And I was really surprised actually to find that there are sort of like rural spaces. Like, for example, like seeing a herd of cows like on the top of this mountain in Hawaii was really surprising to me. And to sort of like see that kinship between Reedsburg, where I live now, and where I had spent some time a year prior to Carly's wedding, and this place that I thought of as paradise. But the sense of being there, also just like the way in which the body is constantly like positioning itself and understanding itself in the landscape of an island, is very strange and wondrous, because sky and ocean are constantly merging, and the horizon line feels like it's this dynamic thing. So that's the image that I had in mind when I selected a poem. And that's sort of like a distilled idea of what wonder means to me.
Of being, I appreciate, and you definitely are a wordsmith, I appreciate the visual that
Mm-hmm.
you painted. So, and it makes me, and it makes me think about that moment when you're standing, like you said, in front of this enormous cow. An animal that you didn't know should be there, a cow in Hawaii. Like I'm spending time between Milwaukee and Anchorage. So outside of my kitchen window in Anchorage, I've seen already 6 moose. Huh? I'm not supposed to be able to see a moose with my eyes that close. And then when you stand in front of the ocean, or any body of water. And I love that the colors blending. You're talking about that horizon moment, and you just have to breathe in the literal awesomeness of that sight. And then you have and then you're reminded how small we are, and not in an insignificant way, not an insignificant kind of a small, but really it's more of a tribute to the grandness of what's around us. And that can be a reverence, but for that to take you to wonder, I like that. Why did that take you to a wonderment?
Well, I think it's because it's, in those moments of smallness that you're talking about, where I realize how small I am, I also realize how lucky, like how wonderful to be here in this particular incarnation with all of the blessings of my life. Of course, we all have our challenges, but to just wonder at the sheer luck of finding myself here in the relationships that you have.
The sheer luck of finding what?
Of finding yourself here in the particular relationships that you're in the particular places that you get to move through. Yeah.
Is that your habit? Is that a habit, or did you shape that muscle? Right? Because it could be like, you can easily go to fast, but you go to wonder. Look at this situation I'm in. I mean, it's a muscle. How was it your position, or did you get there?
It's definitely a muscle that I've shaped for sure through. I've
met some calm children, so you could have been that kid. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I was, like I said, I was a shy kid and I was a pretty calm kid, but like I had a rough adolescence. Figuring out that I was gay in the middle of sort of the Bible Belt at a time. It's so much better now. You know what I mean? Even like a decade and a half later, it's so much better, I think, for kids in my hometown. But it wasn't great. Those teenage years. So coming out of that, definitely this sort of gratitude practice, this reflection practice, and also this sort of like compassion practice of realizing like we're all doing the best that we can. And that doesn't excuse harm. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't excuse violence or harm. And also I found that in allowing myself to sort of like forgive and to contextualize has helped me in this, to your question, like it's helped me like build this muscle of feeling, grateful and lucky most of the time, even in the
operative most of the time, because it can't be great all the time.
Right.
Otherwise, you'd have no scale. There wouldn't be great. It would just be always what it is. And there's the generosity of forgiveness. And that sounds like the generosity to the people and the institutions and the school, whole town, all of that, that they're getting the generous gift. Technically, yes. But what it does for us, and there's that space of, okay, I'm pursuing or I'm working on forgiveness because it's going to free me, which is different from letting it go, pretending it didn't happen, and pretending that it was all right. So I'm certain that in your history, there were folks who for real just didn't know any better. It was modeled or didn't think it would, or I was only, and there are a bunch of folks who were really clear about what they were doing, and they all are in that mush. So forgiveness and not forgettingness, but to give that gift to you is really what it ultimately comes down to. It doesn't make it easier. So I guess you're not going back to the reunion, is what you're saying?
No, I definitely skipped my 10-year reunion for sure.
But to have, and also when you're talking about returning that grace back to the church, back to, and I don't know if it's about redefining, but how can this relationship be different since it was so instrumental to who you are and drawing you into the things that give you so much peace and balance now. And I don't have and I've had a lot of conversations, my parents both had decided they had done so much church that they weren't going to church their kids. So my relationship with religion and church is a very different one. But I have had a lot of conversations with folks who traditionally, you're just here every Sunday or Friday or Saturday and wherever your family came from, because it's what always happened. And then you retroactively try to make that make sense. And they call it that church hurt. So you have all of this working in the swirl and you have still found a gumbo, you find practices from different practices that make sense for you. What would be your advice? And I want to talk about what's exciting for you coming up. So one more question about looking backwards, what's advice or reflection on that journey of repairing the church hurt or revisiting spirituality, particularly to an audience that has been taught to shun you?
Going back to that metaphor of standing in front of the ocean, you know what I mean? And wondering at one's smallness, like compared to this incredible land feature, the body of water. I think for me, that's my relationship with divinity. Do you know what I mean? Like realizing like I'm so small and I'm standing in front of the vast, unknowable thing, and how, sacred and incredible it is that the vast, unknowable thing like witnesses me and that I witness it and that we're in a kind of relationship. And ultimately, I think that is what spirituality is that living relationship, and that religion is a way of trying to codify and hang on and create structure to it, because human beings need structure. Do you know what I mean? Like for most of us, it's very uncomfortable for us to stay in that sort of like amorphous relationship between the small self and the vast unknowable thing. And so we create rituals and we create, institutions and structures essentially to help us latch onto that. The problem is that when the attachment becomes mainly, I think, to the structure, that's when sort of like dogma comes in and fundamentalism comes in, because you forgot that the structure was standing in for something else that is like ultimately shared by everyone and everything. So yeah, I think that remembering that, it's like the rituals are beautiful, the institutions are serving a purpose, but they are surface level standing in for something much deeper.
Okay. It's a fill-in, y'all. It's a fill-in. Everything, it's inside of you, just like the song says. So tell me about something that's coming up that you're excited for. So now we're going to point our gaze forward. So do you have something that you are looking forward to in the immediate future, or some good news or good advice you'd like to share with the good people?
It's a good question. One of the things that I'm looking forward to is I'm 95% sure that I'm going to stick around here in Reedsburg. Okay. The job that I took as director of programs at Worm Farm, the contract was for a year, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to renew it. And I'm surprised to find myself in Sauk County, Wisconsin. You know what I mean? At all what I thought was going to happen, but I'm excited about the possibilities, like continuing public programming here that's really focused on, as I say, bringing artists and farmers together in the landscape, so outdoors. So even with continuing COVID uncertainty, that there is cultural programming that is possible, that is safe, and that's filling a real community need right now. And that is simultaneously joyful and also like addressing serious issues that these communities are facing, and the ways in which through the flow, those programs will connect to what's happening in Milwaukee, Madison, and all along the continuum. So I'm excited for the year.
All of that with putting together artists and farmers in the same place.
Yes.
Sounds like a little world healing.
Yes.
Been telling people artists had the answer. I've been telling them. Oh, but that sounds like incredible work. That no one knows. Who would have known something like that was possible when you were applying for gigs, that you would be able to manage such a, how generative that would be, just those imaginations, those perspectives in the same place.
Yeah. Well, and I also think like that's the work of simile, right? You know what I mean? To say this thing is like this thing. And as a poet, I'm telling you this, like somewhere on some level, you all knew that this thing was like this thing, but you need the poet to come in and like draw the connection. So yeah, I guess like I'm excited about the idea of like putting poets in roles of power and using poetic thinking to like make the world fuller and more connected. I think that that's really the work of being the poet. The words on the page are beautiful and great, but the real work is like drawing those connections in the real world.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Phil for president. That's yes. It's the way that we process. There's a lot of gold in the process. So I'm glad to hear someone else say that out loud. I appreciate it. I'm glad that the universe put you where you needed to be. So more of that. So I would love to hear this poem. How did you find your piece?
So I Googled Island Wonder, and 3 popped up.
Okay.
And I think since we're talking about the rural, this was the first one. And it's a poem by James Wright that I knew and love. It's called Lying in a Hammock at William Duffy's Farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. Over my head, I see the bronze butterfly asleep on the black trunk, glowing like a leaf in green shadow. Down the ravine behind the empty house, the cowbells follow one another into the distances of the afternoon. To my right, in a field of sunlight between 2 pines, the droppings of last year's horses blaze up into golden stones. I lean back as the evening darkens and comes on. A chicken hawk floats over looking for home. I have wasted my life.
Because the moth and the hummingbird did not have a relationship with money, Philip. That's why they did not have a rich relationship with what money could do for them. Oh, that's perfect.
Yes.
That's perfect. That is perfect. That is perfect. Well, thank you so much for making the time to have this quick conversation. I really am glad we had a chance to get to know your journey a bit more. Just know that you were this incredibly insightful person who was putting together artists and farmers. And now I can have a better understanding of how the world got you here. So looking forward to talking with you more.
Thanks for the invitation, Dasha. It's lovely to speak with you always.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you much. And so we are going to have this conversation moving forward. Now, the first thing that came to my mind about wonder is about being curious about everything all the time. Where'd that shirt come from? How did you make that food? What do you think it would feel like when? Just questions that don't always lead to a thing, but the asking is rich and the answer can be curious. And I've always been the one raising my hand in class. No one is surprised to hear that. So I put in raising your hand, asking questions, poem, and the universe gave me Maya Angelou. I know. It's like it's my birthday. So this is They Ask Why. A certain person wondered why a big, strong girl like me wouldn't keep a job which paid a normal salary. I took my time to lead her and to read her every page. Even minimal people couldn't survive on minimum wage. A certain person wondered why I wait all week for you. I didn't have the words to describe just what you do. I said you had the motion of the ocean in your walk, and when you solve my riddles, you don't even have to talk. Maya Angelou, They Ask Why. Today we were talking about wonder. My name is Dasha Kelly Hamilton. These are Poamalogues, and we'll see you again next week where we'll talk about wonder, joy, legacy, or justice. We'll see. But we'll see you there. Thanks.